Your name is deceiver. Because you deceive yourself, you try to say, I rule the kingdom of me. I have a kingdom. I can tell you right now, you do not have a kingdom. You don't own anything. You can't control anything. And you're a runner. You're on the run. My favorite poem is The Hound of Heaven by Francis Thompson. And this is a really haunting few lines I want to read from you. And him is God. It's about God following him, hunting him down. It says, I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind. From those strong feet that followed after, but with unhurrying chase and unperturbed pace, deliberate speed, majestic instancy, they beat, and a voice beat, more instant than the feet. All things betray thee, who betrays me. That's a really haunting few lines. When you think about it, God is absolute goodness. And when you think about the fact that he is absolute goodness and we are sinful creatures, the fact that he is pursuing us is terrifying. A being that cannot harbor sin, that cannot tolerate sin, that demands that we be clean. Right on your heels, right on your shoulder, always behind your back, never stopping, never taking a rest, never stopping for a drink of water, never stopping for a breather. Paul says in Romans 7 that he says, all the things I do is the sin that dwells in me. He says that our sin nature is slave to the law of sin. You were born in sin and you practice sin. And that's why it's so terrifying that God is chasing after us. There's C.S. Lewis said in one of his books, A Grief Observed, he says, what do people mean when they say, I am not afraid of God because I know he is good? Have they never even been to a dentist? I love that quote. It really puts it in a different light. God, you can know that God is good and still be afraid, just like going to the dentist, because we're going to the doctor, because he is absolute goodness and he demands the best from us, and he is right on your heels. But taking it back to the story of Jacob wrestles with God, God catches up with him, and instead of condemning him, instead of finally punishing him for all that Jacob did, all the trickery, all the deceitfulness, he lets Jacob win in the story. He becomes vulnerable. He becomes a man. And he loses. Does that sound familiar? Thousands of years later, God will become a man again. And he would become vulnerable. He would be a baby. He would need a mother. He would need food. He would need water. He would need all those things. But most of all, he was able to die. And he did it. He dared to do it. He said, we will come into battle against one another, but I'll give you the grace to win. I will lose in the sense that I can use that word. I will lose for you. Which we know that God didn't really lose. 3 days later, he won. But the fact that God's wrath was diverted from us, God turned on himself. The second to last thing Jesus said was, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? God himself asking why he forsook himself. That's the crazy part. Because God wanted us so bad that he lost for us. The God of the universe lost for us. And he renames Jacob. He says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. And you know what Israel means? Struggles with God. He says in verse 28, your name will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and you have overcome. You've struggled with God and you have overcome. Do you really think God couldn't take on a pitiful man running for his life? Do you really think? God obviously meant for that to happen. He meant for us to struggle with him. God is always on our heels. But the most significant thing, I think, about this story, notice that it says that Jacob limps when he walks away. Walks with a limp for the rest of his life. He also uses a staff. He mentions it in later chapters. He used the shepherd's staff. A piece of wood to rely on because we can't walk the same anymore. That is the cross of Jesus Christ. When you encounter God, when you wrestle with God, he says, yes, I'll let you win, but you'll never walk the same again. He says, you can't walk away from this saying. You can no longer be running away from me. You can no longer just try to deceive yourself. You have no kingdom, but you do have my kingdom. And he gives him a cross, something to lean on. The cross of Jesus Christ, he says, this is the symbol of your victory. This is the symbol of my loss.